I think that what we're seeing is a systemic shift where, fueled by technological progress, we see new ways in which we can organize ourselves and organize economic activity, labor and business, and which leads to higher productivity and higher efficiency. Essentially what we're seeing is a decrease, an accelerating decrease in transaction costs in organizing labor that is leading to a situation where we no longer need companies in many sectors where we organize as employers and employees. I think that the denominator for all of these things, or this phenomenon that we're talking about, is that we are getting jobs through apps instead of traditional employment. And these jobs are powered through technological platforms like Uber, Airbnb, Hitch, etc. And they are delivered through apps that have the same names: Uber, Airbnb, Hitch, etc. Now, just taking a sort of historic perspective here, 7 years ago in 2010, this sector or this phenomenon was virtually non-existent. And 2010, by the way, was not that long ago. I mean, 2010, it's not like it was the age of the iPod, you know, which was very long ago. We still had iPhones. We just got iPhones in 2010, and we actually also got iPads, right? But back then, Uber had just started. Airbnb was taking its first steps, and this phenomenon was not really discussed, and there were no conferences like this. Now, fast forward 7 years from 2010. Just in Europe last year, this sector facilitated 28 billion euros of transactions. And if we look at this year, it's expected to grow by 60%. Now, if we look another 7 years, in 2025, the sector is predicted to have grown to 570 billion euros. Okay, so then you're saying, well, that's all fine. Whenever there is a conference like this, the keynote speaker always shouts out these big numbers, talking about billions and millions, to give this sort of wow effect. Who cares, right? But let's think about that for a moment. So 7 years ago, it was 0. Today, it's a factor of 1. And in 7 years, it's a factor of 20. And if we think about what this means, not in terms of money or dollar value, but if we think about what this means for our lives, you know, let's close our eyes and think about what does this look like in our city and what people are doing. We're talking about a world where, let's forget about the world. We're talking about a situation outside where we have 20 times more Uber drivers than we have today, where we have 20 times more Airbnb hosts, task runners, Hitch drivers, and so on and so forth, doctors that come through apps. I mean, I just started using Min Doctor and Kry this last month, so 20 times that. And we're starting to get at least a sense of where we're heading. And by the way, we're heading there really, really, really fast, right? So still in the age of the iPad and the iPhone. Who knows what comes after that? Now at the same time, and this is a bit weird, Sweden, which, you know, I love Sweden. And it's funny because when we're in Sweden, most Swedes don't really talk about how much they love Sweden. But then when we go outside of Sweden, we're like, Sweden is the greatest place. Let me tell you about the social security and the mammaledighet and all of that, right? And the technology here is fantastic. You know, let's forget about Ericsson. That was centuries ago. We have Spotify and so on. But actually, if you look at the numbers, we are lagging behind quite a lot. You know, we have less than half as many app-based jobs, if you would say, than countries like UK and France. And let's not even talk about the US, because we're light years behind that. And I think that's important to note this. And the reason why it's important to note this because the gut reaction from Nordic legislators and some regulators, not talking about Skatteverket of course, is quite often to restrict the growth of this phenomenon, which in essence curtails the productivity growth of our economy. And let's not get too over dramatic, but I would argue also threatens the welfare, the future welfare of our society. Now that might sound harsh and dramatic, but let's remember then that the prosperity that we enjoy today in the world and in our society is the primary reason for that is 100 years of very strong productivity growth. Politicians talk about unemployment and employment level and blah, 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 but actually productivity growth is much more important if you ask an economist. We're talking about workers' rights, social security, pensions, and so on, which of course need to be managed in this kind of pivoted world. Also consumer protections, where someone will speak later today, I think Karin Bradley maybe, and also one of the things highest on the agenda, tax collection. Making sure both that the tax burden is even, so that we don't get unfair advantage anywhere, but also that taxes are collected, and so no one can cheat and make the wrong thing. So all that's fine, but the constructive way to move forward can only be through smart regulation that, and by smart is a sort of fuzzy word, by regulation that empowers and pushes this phenomenon forward while still making sure to protect these values. And then someone would say, well, that's just your opinion. Actually, it's not just my opinion. A very smart man, smarter than me, Jan Stenbeck, pointed out that while politics can defeat money sometimes, technology will at the end always prevail over politics. It's a little bit like that reggae quote where you can fool some people some of the time, but you can't fool, well, maybe not exactly. All right, so moving forward then, talking about the situation here, looking out in this room, although we have very impressive lineups, it's important also to point out that I counted at least 60 startups in this space in Sweden alone. And I don't think that those 60 startups, all of them are represented here today. So the startups that are here today are only the tip of the iceberg, I would say. And these companies really represent an undelivered opportunity where we all get to contribute in an ecosystem where we sort of create jobs together in a collaborative way by the power of platforms and coordinated by the usability of smartphone apps. Now, I'll try to round off a little bit, but just to summarize, what we're talking about. We're talking about a situation where we have jobs that come through apps, where you yourself decide when to work, where to work, and who to work for. App-based jobs where you can get a job in a heartbeat by downloading an app and signing up for work, and where you actually can quit the job with a notice period of 3 seconds instead of 3 months, just by simply logging off. Now, whatever we call them, if we call them app-based jobs or gigs or sharing jobs or collaborative jobs, they are already here by a factor of 1. They will be by a factor of 20 in 7 years. They are the jobs of tomorrow. They are the reality of the tomorrow that we will see out. And so my message is, we better get it right today. And with that, I wish you all a good luck, and let's kick off this day.
Thank you. Do we have any online questions for Alok?
Hello. Yes, so far there have been a couple of positive cheering up comments on your speech. Not specific questions yet. So perhaps somebody in the audience.
Yes, please. We need a microphone. Just a second. No, I think you need the mic. Sorry. She's coming.
I can do sign language.
It's easy to consider Uber a small company, but roughly how many employees did you have on Uber and UberPop in Sweden?
So first of all, I'm no longer with Uber, and this was sort of a figure that wasn't really public when I was working for Uber. I think what was reported in the press was that there were a couple of thousand partner drivers on the UberPop platform. I think it was reported it was somewhere above 5,000 partner drivers on the UberPop platform.
Okay. I have one question. Why? How does it come that Sweden and the Nordic is lagging behind in this new economy?
So that's almost a question more to the sort of regulators and legislators. Why?
But what's your view?
Yeah, but I would say that for some reason we don't have the same pace in innovation around regulatory reform as they have in other countries. That is actually not to say that we don't have the ambition, because there's quite a lot of ambition. I mean, there's utredningar kors and tvärs around everything, and perhaps that's the reason. I mean, in Sweden we love these utredningar, and they take 3 years. But then with a 3-year lifetime of an utredning, you're already looking at probably a factor 5 growth in the phenomenon, and during that time you haven't done anything. And then, by the way, after the utredning, as I've learned now that I've been in this space a little bit, it's not like when the utredning is finished everything's fine, because then you have to go through this the parliament, and then there's elections to consider and so on and so forth. So it easily goes on for like 5 to 7 years, and then then we're at factor 20.
Yep. Okay. I think we need to, if you don't have a very important question, I think we should have a change of scene here. So thank you very much, Alok.
Thank you.
Good.
Cheers.
BizzGrid, events made by you.